He helped run a billion-dollar company, turning Chick-fil-A into a international or national powerhouse. We sit down with Jimmy Collins about his book, Creative Followership, and how that could help the next generation find greatness.
And in terms of your ballot, hundreds, if not thousands of cases of potential voter fraud uncovered in North Carolina. We first talked about it Friday, and now the National Review's John Fund on how it happened and what's next later this hour.
And a grand jury is probing Chris Christie's role in the George Washington Bridge scandal. Journalist Howie Carr joins us later in the show on the investigation and what role the media is playing. America's Forum continues right now.
On this first day of the work week, we welcome you back to Hour 2 of America's Forum. I'm J.D. Hayward.
And I'm John Bachman. Jay, let's talk about voting fraud a little bit real quickly. In a case out of your home state of North Carolina, hundreds of potential cases, maybe thousands even, of voter fraud have been uncovered in North Carolina. State elections officials are examining the issues right after finding thousands of registered voters whose misinformation matched those in other states, or whose information, including everything from their dates of birth and their names. This despite a law passed last year requiring officials to check voters' information against a database of 28 other states. Joining us right now to discuss this is John Fund from the National Review Online. He's also the author of Who's Counting? How Fraudsters and Bureaucrats Put Your Vote at Risk.
John Fund, we welcome you back to America's Forum. This topic continues to gain currency. You wrote the book heralding what was transpiring. Let's go to the North Carolina case, since that's my native state. How on earth does something like this happen, John? And what changes do you believe need to be implemented to prevent this from happening in other states?
Incompetence and, in some cases, maliciousness is the answer as to how it happens, J.D. You know, in North Carolina, like many states, in 1993, it came under the federal voter registration law called Motor Voter. And that law not only allowed you to vote and register by postcard or absentee ballot very easily, it also made enormous restrictions on the states as to how they could clean up their voter rolls. You couldn't remove someone unless they hadn't voted in something like 5 federal elections. North Carolina was one of the worst states. They had what is called in the trade deadwood. People who were not eligible anymore, they died or they moved out of state, or they were felons, or they were illegal aliens, and they couldn't remove them from the rolls, or they didn't want to remove them from the rolls. As a result, you have an enormous number of people, and it's very easy to figure out who hasn't voted in a long time and how you can vote in their place.
So we have that situation, and we talked about the fact that so many states are doing a cross-check. Now, I know that typically, John, there is a hesitancy to have a federal role played, but at this point in time, should the Congress intervene for a federal cross-check system for every one of the 50 states, no questions asked, or a lot of questions asked, but that be something set in federal statute?
I don't want to go there, and I don't think you really would get the cooperation of states unless they really wanted to do it. New York and California, for example, are fighting cross-check, but 28 states have signed up. And I think that we can continue to expand cross-check by putting pressure. North Carolina discovered all of these voters who had possibly voted in another state as well as in North Carolina because they finally joined cross-check in January. The real issue here is the federal government does have a role. That is, it provides states with extra money to improve their voting machines and upgrade their technology. But there is a catch, which is the federal government can require the states to clean up their voter rolls right now. They can do it any way they want, cross-check or some other procedure. But ever since Barack Obama took office, the Justice Department has dropped all of those requirements of states. In fact, they even had a victory in Missouri. They were requiring Missouri to clean up its voter rolls because something like 40 counties in Missouri had more people registered to vote than there were adults over the age of 18 according to the census. JD, we call that a clue something is wrong. And the Justice Department had won that case effectively in court, and they suddenly dropped it. So you can't really have a federal law unless you have federal officials that are actually willing to enforce it. That's why I think we probably are going to have to wait for federal officials who care about this issue.
Well, John, in Texas and Arizona and other southern states, this issue with Eric Holder has been somewhat of a priority here. You mentioned this has gone on, the last case you talked about, since Barack Obama has been in office here. Is this a deeper Democratic priority, or is this something that's really being spearheaded by Obama and the Holder Justice Department?
Well, I think the liberal groups like the Brennan Center and various other groups have long fought voter ID laws, even though vast majorities of the American people support them and other measures to combat voter fraud, like cleaning up absentee ballot fraud. And the Justice Department, unfortunately, has been in lockstep with them. Many of the people the Justice Department hires come from these liberal pressure groups. And that's not my opinion, that's the opinion of the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, who said there was clearly bias in hiring in terms of ideology at the career slots of the Justice Department. It's one thing, when you hire political appointees, you're free to hire people who agree with you. But when you're hiring career people, you're supposed to hire people who, shall we say, follow the law rather than follow their party. And that's not being done at the Justice Department.
Well, perhaps one of the most egregious episodes of this, John, occurred, 10 days to a couple of weeks ago in Cincinnati, where a woman convicted at the state level of voting for Barack Obama in the last presidential election a total of 6 times. She earned early release when she was convicted under Ohio law. But then Eric Holder and the Justice Department says they're not going to prosecute her. Al Sharpton goes into Cincinnati, holds a rally, has that woman there as if she is a victim of being part of the downtrodden, celebrates, for all intents and purposes, her achievement. With this kind of mindset going on, is there any action that Governor Kasich or the Secretary of State of Ohio should take? Or now with this woman getting early release, that's that in terms of her particular case?
Well, that's been resolved, and I mean, it was a travesty to see Al Sharpton hug a woman who had been convicted of voter fraud while she was a poll worker. I mean, her sworn duty as an election official was to make sure there were no problems in elections, and instead she was creating problems in the elections. But I think that Governor Kasich and the Ohio legislature have done a pretty good job of cleaning up the voter rolls, and basically, with Secretary of State John Husted there, saying, look, we want everyone to vote, but civil rights can be violated in 2 ways. One, you can prevent people from voting, and we fought a civil rights struggle in the 1960s to make sure that didn't happen, and we need to continue those gains. And 2, you can also have your civil rights violated if someone votes in your place. If someone is voting who's an illegal alien or voting out of state or has died, someone is voting in their place. Or someone who doesn't even exist and is voting by postcard, by mail. So I think that Ohio can do a lot of things, but the case of Meloise Richardson, which is a very sad and troubling one, is over.
Well, John, you mentioned, that this is talked about in 28 states, or done by 28 states, where they cross-check the rolls here with other states, determine who's voted and who has not voted. But what is the argument from states like California who say that we don't need this type of protection or scrutiny on these voters?
Well, the same argument that many people who oppose voter ID and other anti-fraud measures have. There is no voter fraud, therefore there is no problem. Well, I just have to point to headline after headline, including, of course, North Carolina, where you have potentially thousands of people who've been caught voting in one or more states, that clearly there is a problem. But there's this sense of denial. And I believe that the only thing that we can do in states like California and New York is continue to have pressure put through after all of these incidents that happen, and simply say, look, the voters, there's a reason why you have low voter turnout. A lot of voters no longer have confidence in the fairness and integrity of our elections. You want to continue to have low voter turnout? Continue to ignore these issues and continue to refuse to clean up the voter rolls.
John Fund, only about a minute left, but I think back post-2000 and all the charges and counter charges, you had a situation where there was a bipartisan commission. Former President Jimmy Carter for the Democrats, former Secretary of State James Baker, and there was consensus in that bipartisan report that voters should be able to prove they are who they claim they are. Do you expect to see Jimmy Carter invited to offer a bipartisan perspective, or is that now pardon the southern pun, gone with the wind.
No, Jimmy Carter stands by his report of 2004. He's obviously moved on to other things. There used to be a lot more bipartisan support for doing the right thing. Look, we can make voting easy and convenient for people. We can also make it hard to cheat. We should be able to do both. That's what the 2004 Commission recommended. Unfortunately, this has become a partisan battle, and those recommendations are being largely ignored.
John Fund, we appreciate your insights on this as always, and sad to say, this is not a story that will disappear anytime soon, so we know we'll have you back on this topic and so many others.
Thanks. And the book is Who's Counting, which is available at Amazon and all the other good bookstores.
All right, certainly something worth checking out, especially when you talk about those cases in North Carolina. When we come right back, we'll be talking to the former Chief Operating Officer of Chick-fil-A, his message for young people if they want to achieve success, right after this.